just heard Snow Patrol with their song Empress here on 88.1 FM WVYC, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning into my show for this 3 o'clock hour. You're with me, Keelan Tollinger, for the next full hour, and so I seem to keep talking about weather whenever I start up my program and come on the air, so we seem to have survived another major hurricane of 2018. That was Florence, which inundated the Carolina coast with rain, took its time bending upwards towards the northeast, and dumped some remnant showers here in Pennsylvania from around Monday to Tuesday. That storm did not mess around. I think the average throughout most of North Carolina was 20 inches of rain, which is pretty incredible. Some of the pictures were just pretty insane too, like a streetlight on a creek bank covered all the way up to just barely at the top with water. I think they were saying like, I don't know, 1 million evacuated, 600,000 homes losing power, maybe like an actual maximum of like 32 inches of rain. Now, if someone had the count of deaths during the storm has been a little varied. It's sort of been hard to pin that down. Say if someone had a medical emergency and no personnel could answer, a source might count that and another might not. Some circumstances like trees falling through homes, 2 separate deaths were associated with that. I think it's placed about 36 lives or so lost during Florence. I'll tell you one thing that was miraculous: the number of lives that were saved in the wake of Super Typhoon Mangkhut. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The images we saw on TV of Florence with the wind was nothing compared to the 165 mile per hour winds that storm was sending. It was a Category 5 when it made its way into the Philippines. It rolled into Hong Kong and then wound its way into mainland Asia. The count of that storm sits at about 80 or so, with most of the deaths resulting from over a dozen mudslides. But that's just remarkable considering how many villages were impacted. An incredibly densely populated city like Hong Kong, there's photos of these high-rise apartments with such small rooms, like 7 stories of these identically shaped spaces, maybe 10 or so in a row, every single window blown out, scaffolding tossed in the streets, but still, the preparedness these countries had meant so many lives were saved. If you tuned in last week, you know several of the Facebook events I talked about that were sort of in poor taste. I've kind of got a bit of a gripe with the news media on reporting this whole thing with Florence. You may have seen a reaction to a report from the Weather Channel's Mike Seidel. He's been there since the 90s, covering extreme weather from the spot. There's a live report of him from North Carolina in his rainproof coat. He's got his legs spread and he's bracing himself in place, getting pushed around a bit, saying it's as nasty as it's been into the mic, just, fighting to stay standing. Out of the corner of this shot come, 2 guys with, hoodies, shorts, and sneakers. Their hands in their pockets, and they're just strolling along. Everybody can tell that Mike Seidel is over-exaggerating. The wind speed in the corner of his report was, 40 miles per hour, at the gusts, but it's still pretty, it's just trying to, liven it up for the report and make it interesting television. Regardless of all, the needless complaining I'm doing about this whole thing, you have to admit that when news stations send out people to lash themselves to fence posts or banisters and stand out in the rain, when they're genuinely getting tossed around, it's just you sort of feel bad for them. And you sort of feel bad for the stations that send them out there. And they're just trying to take advantage of our whole human reaction to not wanting to take our eyes off a disaster. They know we're tuning in and they want to run a few ads in between the coverage just to benefit a bit from the influx of viewers. In a way, I get that the Weather Channel, for instance, is in pretty dire straits. Hurricane and blizzard season are the only times when they can get a lot of ratings for their coverage. Otherwise, it's local weather reports and the ones that Apple provides to our smartphones and such. They're just enough for people to get by with their weather information. You don't tune your television to a different channel most times in the morning to get a planner for your day outside. When I was really young and thinking of my dream jobs as a kid, a weatherman was at the top of my list, I won't deny. But there's sort of a human element these meteorologists are desperate to fill, because prediction technologies these days, with their Doppler radars and atmospheric reads, there's likely less pressure to analyze reports and get them right. Most of the work that's done isn't at a desk, it's in front of a camera. And yeah, most of the work They just have to keep eyes glued to the television. But yeah, I have diverted a lot of attention from hurricane issues enough. So let's move on, and hopefully that's the last scare of a relatively quiet season. We can start repairing the material things that we lost. Slowly we should see the Carolinas coming back to normal. But what else is on the way for this show? A prehistoric stone surfaced in the world of archaeology recently that has some scientists speculating on the origins of our species some more. The supposed death of an American fast food staple, not as big of a deal as it sounds, but the news is conversely about downsizing. An Amazon product gets a better brain, and the question is being raised in academic institutions like these. What exactly are college students learning these days? I'll have that when I come back soon here on 88.1 FM. So, some music to start off the hour. Belgian indie rock band Intergalactic Lovers coming at you with their song Between the Lines here on 88.1 FM WVYC. Back in a bit. Intergalactic Lovers with Between the Lines here on 88.1 FM WVYC. Welcome back. You're with me, Kiel and Tollinger. The New York Times said that archaeologists reported last Wednesday that a find within a South African cave has given new clues as to what our ancestors were up to way, way back when. They were drawing on stones. We knew there were cave paintings here and there like we'd expect, but I don't think the science world anticipated finding a drawing that dates back 73,000 years. Now, the group of the artifacts this team from the University of Bergen in Norway were investigating were dug up around 2011. They came from the Blombos Cave in South Africa, where researchers estimate the first members of our species were living about 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. They were digging up remains and artifacts like seashell beads, teeth, spear points, and tools. But a student was cleaning some of these other pieces when he came across a stone flake, like a small potato chip of rock about the size of 2 of your thumbnails. There were 9 red streaks drawn onto it, 6 of them being parallel lines, and 3 of them curved. It kind of looked like a puzzle piece of something. Electronic microscopes had to be brought in to try and scan these unnatural markings, and they found it to be red ochre, like a clay and sand pigment you can make right out of the ground, like simple paint. But that sort of composition has apparently been used by prehistoric humans for 100,000 years now. This stone flake was the first piece of evidence in the Middle Stone Age where it's thought that they were trying to draw something, be it an actual picture or maybe just an abstract couple of lines from all the way back 73,000 years ago. So then the story gets a little boring. Now these scientists are concerned how the pattern was made, and they started speculating what the picture was supposed to be. They started sort of with the assumption that maybe these ancient humans were trying to make paint, maybe the chip was part of a wall or something. These folks went through the trouble of making a wooden brush and tried copying this kind of rock the flake was. And then they actually tried it dry like a crayon and found that a tip only about a millimeter or so in thickness was used to scribble these red lines on their sample. That basically goes to show the utility of what these ancient humans were doing. Whenever someone wanted to draw and didn't want to go through the trouble of mixing up paint, somebody was probably carrying around a crayon to make their symbols. It's basically the birth of a different visual art medium, if you want to call it that. This discovery expanded the possibilities that abstract and figure drawings were going on for, because they found paintings in the same ochre material in France and Spain, Namibia and Indonesia, maybe only about 42,000 years ago. Neanderthal paintings about 64,000 years, but all the way back 73,000 years, these history studiers didn't realize it was habit that prehistoric people went around drawing on walls like toddlers do with crayon. Now what these symbols were, these scientists aren't sure. There's proof at least there was an understanding of shapes and symbols way back then because they found engravings and markings in other areas of this Blombos cave. It could be that there's a mural or a sketch trying to be made at that point, and I'm sure the next move is to start guessing what figure could be partially made out of 9 lines. Others in the article aren't so sure. Maybe they're part of like a grindstone of somebody else actually trying to make paint. But you see, even scientists are allowed to speculate as much as tabloid reporters and anchors are on news stations, just as ancient humans are allowed to come up with their own Crayola colors and doodle on stuff. Just an interesting article that I read and thought I'd share, so I'll make it a habit to look out for more significant studies in the future along those lines. It is now 3:17 at York College of Pennsylvania. We were talking about some ancient life, so here is Lord Huron with Secret of Life, here on 88.1 FM WVYC. Back in a few. Welcome back to 88.1 FM WVYC, Secret of Life by Lord Huron. I'm Keelan Tellinger, and let's get back into the news. So, the $5 footlong is sort of dead, is a headline that should grab your attention, considering how dramatic it's trying to be. But yes, Subway's famous deal is on its way out. This was confirmed in a USA Today article last Monday by the CEO. This has been missing in most Subway restaurants for a while, actually. You might remember the company quietly reintroduced the deal in the winter for 2 months. But that ended in most of their sandwiches are now $6 and $7 or so. I forget the exact year, but Subway tried changing which of their featured menu items was on the $5 footlong list for 1 month at a time. The only way you can get the prices to go down like before is with traditional coupons, something that a miserly college student like me has to keep relying on to eat there. We all still remember the catchy commercials, maybe even took advantage of the deal years ago, since it was way back in 2008 this campaign was launched. The whole history of this ties back to the balance between the corporation and the franchisees, the stores that are using Subway's name and product, but are acting relatively independently. The $5 footlong is basically a product of its time. In 2004, a man named Stuart Frankel created his own deal for his pair of Miami stores that he owned. Every footlong sub was $5 on the weekends. Even though that was $1 off the usual price, it seemed to be an effective strategy. Everybody likes round numbers. The whole corporation then picked up the deal and spread it across the country in 2008. And the opportunity was perfect, because remember, this was the time of the recession. Wallets were tight, and so a sandwich you could share, have 2 meals of, that was a big deal. The promotion went from 4 weeks to 7 weeks, then it was basically permanent with only a select list of 8 subs. They were firing on all cylinders, this restaurant, for a while. People thought these sandwiches were as healthy as you could get from a fast food chain, since these options were never fried. It even helped a famous spokesperson lose weight. Boy, did that backfire though in time. And other food chains quickly pounced to mimic this promotion. KFC came up with a $5 fill-up combo and stuff. Taco Bell with a $5 box with a couple menu items and a side. A contradiction eventually emerged, though, in time about how profitable this really was. Franchisees started to complain, petitioning to the chain that when you take an average of $2 for ingredients, then the price of labor, utilities, the royalties of the corporation, credit card fees, and renting restaurant space, it adds up to an average of $4 or more to produce a $5 sandwich. It adds, it's factor in geography too, and the way you do business in New York City isn't the same as doing it in North Dakota. The blanketing strategy that they did, the numbers, they don't work anymore compared to 10 years ago. Then comes kind of the outside disasters that took place. Then basically the 12-inch rolls you expect your sandwich to come on in a regular Subway order, they're kind of a lie. They're actually in the ballpark of 11 inches, and that shouldn't be too much of a big deal, but they still got a lawsuit about false advertising in 2013 against them. And that's been dismissed in 2017, fortunately. Other than that, Jared Fogle, the Subway spokesperson who lost so much weight with the help of the subs, apparently, yeah, he was arrested and convicted for possessing child pornography. Couple these public relations shakeups with the fact that, for instance, Subway can't tout itself as the healthiest fast food place, since the likes of Panera Bread began to tie with them as America's favorite sandwich shop. And every restaurant that does service quick can also slide you a refrigerated salad across the counter if you want to eat healthy. And nowadays, everyone has a deal that's packaged sort of like Subway's. My favorite is the 4 for $4 at Wendy's, where a small sandwich, 4 nuggets, a small fry, and a drink all come to a total of $4.24 at the register. That is a perfectly balanced lunch. And if you download the Wendy's app on your smartphone, you can order something online, and buying something, anything from them, nets you a free Dave's cheeseburger. Dairy Queen around here gives you a burger and a sundae for $4. McDonald's, I think, hands you a deal where if you order a pair of any 7 select items, like the 10-piece McNuggets are on there, the Big Mac, the Filet-O-Fish, just combine 2 and that's $5. The $5 footlong in the face of what all these other restaurants are doing is basically old news. Does that mean Subway might fade away completely as a chain in the coming years? Not quite, I think. They had to just readjust the value of their sandwiches and that's it. I've got a story from over the summer about food products being downsized, and I've got no other way to share this than in this context. So my father, as an engineer, often visits plants that manufacture all kinds of grocery brand stuff. Procter & Gamble, Mission Foods with their tortillas. They're in my area back in Northeast PA. He visited the Ring Pop facility at one point and saw the chain where the candy is made. He told me they had a line for all the regular lollipops, and they had a second one for Walmart's. It already makes me ask the question, what could the reason be that they need to have a separate batch for an entire supermarket? Ring Pops had to adjust their resale pricing at one point to take into account the cost of production years ago. That meant the standard candy price maybe had to be hiked up a few cents everywhere. And Walmart, in their whole motto to keep their sale prices the same, refused and said if there's any way to not have to give the consumers this increase, they'd do whatever it takes. So basically that meant Ring Pop sold in every Walmart store is about an ounce or so less to make it even, just a tad smaller than what you'll find everywhere else. Do people notice it? Obviously not, since there isn't a mass revolt from the people who measured their Subway sandwiches. I'm willing to bet there's even the change printed on the wrappers, and you still wouldn't think much of it unless you were in the manufacturing plant and told the reason. Something similar, I swear, happened towards the beginning of 2018 with the Toblerone chocolate bar, I think. It's the candy that comes in a triangular box because it has all these iconic peaks that imitate the Swiss Alps. People complained over social media to them that when they opened up what they thought were 200-gram Toblerone bars and found 150-gram ones inside instead, the gaps between the triangles were twice as wide than usual. The company said this was because the ingredients for the chocolate were getting more expensive, so it was time to either offer less or increase the price. Now the backlash they weathered, people saying their shoe could fit between the gaps, that someone had stolen half the triangles before they opened their bar, Toblerone responded and put 200 grams back in their bars about a month later. And I think that was partially because all the complaints they got increased their popularity and their revenue soared. But everything else I said is just another instance of American products having to react to the times. When health trends change, when labor and operating costs go up, when the whole landscape of the restaurant industry changes by the day whenever a new commercial is run, places like Subway have tough decisions to make. It really gets to be hectic at times how necessary promotions have to be in advertising, always changing up the formulas. Because without the added traffic of people coming in to try whatever the new deal is, consumers will be pulled elsewhere. They'll go experiment somewhere else. Allegiance to fast food chains is fortunately not a thing to many people. That gets us to about 3:30 on the dot here at York College of Pennsylvania. Let's move on to another song for the hour. Talos with their song This Is Us Colliding. Up next here on 88.1 FM WVYC. I'll be right back. Welcome back to 88.1 FM WVYC, the voice of York College. Talos with This Is Us Colliding. My name is Keelan Tollinger, and thanks for joining me back in the studio. Let's move on to the next topic. So, hey, if you've ever felt down on your luck at some point throughout 2017, rest assured you don't have it as bad as a Cleveland Browns football fan. They had to endure an entire year, an entire season of just straight losses last year. They went 0-16. Though the new season just begun, the Browns had to deal with a tie and a loss to open up their 2018 campaign. But just last night, the lucky team that got to lose against the Browns and is the new miserable city in the nation, that belongs to the fans of the New York Jets. After 635 days, all the way back since Christmas Eve 2016, the Browns finally shook off their losing streak, thanks to their quarterback, who was just picked up from the NFL draft, fresh out of college. He came off the bench after the first quarterback got a concussion, and he orchestrated what'll be known as maybe the most pointless comeback in football. It's good for them, though. They're showing signs of improvement, but I still think they might go 0-13 the rest of the year. Just my thoughts. Now back to the real news. We are nearing the AI takeover day by day here in the United States. Wired.com reports that Amazon is evaluating new technology for their Alexa products. Yes, the little cylindrical speakers that sort of act as your personal servant and respond to your voice. Like Alexa, add eggs to my shopping list. Or Alexa, turn off the kitchen lights. Alongside an Amazon brand microwave for $60 apparently, and also a new wall clock, Amazon says Alexa is taking its process known as machine learning a little further and being more perceptive to other noises. The engineers hope to have Alexa piecing together sounds like glass being smashed or the smoke alarm going off on your second floor. This pseudo home security system called Alexa Guard plans to be activated when you say something like, Alexa, I'm leaving, and that triggers a monitoring phase for a span of hours that you set. Alexa would then be able to reach out to your cell phone and send you messages if it catches something that would include a small recording of the sound it heard. No plans to hook it up to an actual security company and alert the police right away, but this feature is just another way to keep the security of your home in check while away at work and stuff. What about while you're inside your home and interacting with your Alexa? They're teaching this thing to even perceive speech tone and volume with any luck. So if I'm downstairs in my house back up north and I want to turn off the lights on the first floor, everybody's in bed. I typically have to say, Alexa, lights out, at least a few times to get it to register my voice because I'm trying to be quiet. What these engineers are doing is making it more sensitive to whispers, even going so far as to responding back to you in a low, subdued voice. If you really want to ask who won the Super Bowl in 1996 while your dog is trying to nap on the couch across the room, well, Alexa could someday tell you it was the Dallas Cowboys very quietly. Even frustration in somebody's voice, which is funnier to me, they're trying to pick that up. Because the Alexa's speech recognition is not perfect yet, so in the times you want to have it, say, open the garage, sometimes it'll announce opening garage band playlist and start blasting music. There's no concrete plans to implement this feature with frustration yet. I mean, they're still looking for ways to see what harsher tones could do to help their machine learning. But even if it knows that somebody's saying no, Alexa, stop, and when the thing is just trying to help, that's live troubleshooting and improvement they can put into their product without a technology engineer sitting there to observe it. Now, privacy is obviously still a concern with Alexa, because willingly letting this machine monitor your house for any stray noises, it pretty much has the capability to pay attention to every conversation. I mean, it practically does that already, considering the fact that the moment you say its name and it listens to every command afterwards, that's already happening. So Amazon says that they want to keep using their technology ethically and putting customer trust first. So no doubt there will be ways in place to turn off features and limit what's allowed to be picked up and processed. It comes down to what you're comfortable sharing. The one thing that I find fascinating is that Alexa's really anticipated our laziness as citizens, though. I guess I could say that. People don't even want to reach for their phones anymore and type in some items for the shopping list sometimes. They'd rather talk to their phone, they'd rather talk to their speaker on the counter and tell it apples, cheese, and bread so it appears on their phone for later. The Alexa in my home basically controls all the first floor lights between the kitchen and the living room so that the set of 3 switches on the wall don't even have to be pressed. And it is maybe a hassle sometimes to have to say, Alexa, turn off this, and I sort of wait around and then say, Alexa, turn off that, and make sure it heard me correctly, and I had to see the ceiling go dim and stuff like that. But I find that as stuff like voice recognition progresses, it can only get more efficient and effective to add to our everyday life. But yeah, it sort of spoils us though with the convenience. Anyway, currently it is about 3:39 here at York College of Pennsylvania. Let's take another break from talking here on WVYC. Up next is Mondo Cosmo with their song Tonight, Tonight. You're listening to 88.1 FM WVYC, and I will be back in a moment. Welcome back, 88.1 FM WVYC, Mondo Cosmo with Tonight Tonight. And about 15 minutes left for my show. I'm going to get into the final topic, which is an article written by PBS NewsHour. It got my interest this week. So colleges face pressure to answer a basic question. What are students learning? It seems like a relatively simple question. I mean, most students have chapters and things to keep track of in their heads. They may be doing some hands-on learning in the meantime. Put it in maybe a parent's perspective sometimes. There's no more asking at the dinner table, "What did you learn at school today?" And though the answer could certainly evolve to be more than stuff at an adult's age, there's actually a lack of clarity as to what colleges are supposed to be teaching their students across the many disciplines. So maybe you're familiar with the lofty, impressive sounding mission statements that universities and higher education schools offer when you read about who they are. It's always prestigious facilities, a commitment to making young professionals, engaging with them often, building lifelong skills, and yet what gives them the right to make these sorts of claims? Is there evidence to back it up? That's what this article was trying to answer, because a lot of the signs say that institutions are just as unsure as we are about the end results of something like graduate schooling. For comparison's sake, look at the way that learning is checked in elementary grade school districts. They have the collective grades of the student body in most cases, sometimes by the individual grades in fields like math, science, and reading. These are basically continually retested. Schools will standardize so much of the process that every child is evaluated rigorously and similarly. And you'll often find that these sorts of results in the local newspaper, what the average SAT scores are like that year, is the area performing above or below the regional and national average. Having these statistics at hand helps a lot for parents to choose where they want to send their children, for one thing. It decides a lot about the future of the generations to come. But the funny thing is, a lot of that transparency stops at the collegiate level. You can't exactly gauge how students perform at a college or university because it's very, almost secretive. Like, when you're applying for a school, at least, you can often view what's the average SAT score of accepted students, see that acceptance rate, but once you're inside the school, a lot of that benchmarking and checking in that they do for like 13 grades prior, that sort of falls away. That's why higher education now is under pressure to live up to the goals that they proclaim in their mission statements. Because especially, a lot of money is involved in choosing and paying for a college. It's way more than a school district tax. Stakeholders want to see a return on the investment, so there's a need for testing and standardization, but the problem is, what exactly and how do you suppose schools should do that for their diverse student body? A nursing student, like a chemistry student, and a history student are all turning their attentions towards different things. I mean, you can spread a lot of the basic requirements out for them that they have to meet, but come to the point that they're in their senior years, a lot of what they're doing in their coursework isn't still going to be developing their foundational skills across the board. One's going to be prioritizing hospital bed making, one's going to be traversing the periodic table, and the other's going to be looking at how empires around the world have changed over the centuries. So that's basically the dilemma they face. The last thing you can expect is every single senior in a college sitting down at a desk before they're handed each of their chosen degrees, and telling them to do a test in each essential subject like 10th graders. I'm going to tell you now that as a student of writing, if you put me in front of like 20 long division questions and tell me to do it all by hand, I'm going to be there all night. like math evaporated as soon as I had my second semester underway. I had one class that combined a basic level of statistics, critical thinking, and stuff like monthly budgeting and taxes, but I know I've lost just about everything in geometry, physics, and calculus, since now it's been 4 years since I've seen a common problem like that. With the sciences, a basic chemistry course of elements in everyday life, but just next to nothing about laboratory experiments, biology, and stuff. Your college's Generation Next program, which debuted as soon as I and other freshmen came into the school, has a grand mission statement saying that it wants to make us skilled professionals in our careers, able to think flexibly for ourselves, develop us into the modern day standard. But again, that standard is missing in concrete language. Like, the sorts of experimental classes we're all required to take here in our early years, which fall away and become more discipline-centric over time, like a chemistry major does his music and film elective and has his history class, but in the end, he's totally concerned with his field. That does make sense to me in preparing people for their chosen careers, the professional world, but that still doesn't really satisfy what some groups are calling for. And that's transparent results for how successful a college and university students are within the classroom. That is the struggle they're having at the moment. What students learn is less important than having a winning football team if you want to stay afloat in the collegiate world. That's how one quote individual put it very dryly. There's some efforts to implement such a system for evaluations. 18 universities and colleges were a part of the voluntary institutional metrics project to compare things like cost, graduation rate, employment, student debt, and what students are learning across all the participants. But they couldn't obtain everything, like student learning had limited or no data to report. The Spellings Commission, for instance, found that quality of student learning in these institutions is often inadequate or in some cases declining. Let's see. So there was a study of 57% of college graduates that say they fail a civil literacy exam after graduation. Bar exam passing rates have declined slightly over the last decade. And 11% of business leaders that were surveyed say that colleges and universities are not adequately preparing their students for the workforce. Oh, sorry, are adequately preparing the students for the workforce. So yeah, 89% say no, it's not enough. A Gallup survey had 42% of alumni strongly agree that they were challenged academically in college. The numbers are just bleak and unconvincing to some people, and there's no denying that students are learning something. The article isn't denying that, but how schools are going around declaring their results is either very hard to do, or they're just being very secretive about it to protect their prestige. They don't go after these results. The public does deserve to know, and they should expect it, but this work is very new terrain across the country, and it might take a lot of time, say IBM with their Watson supercomputer to step up and start finding a magic formula to say how a school is doing, but that's a long way off from happening. What could be done is more assessment into the basic level criteria, like math and writing, like I was saying. Now, writing, I think, particularly for how important it is in the professional world, if you can't write an email very maturely, your profile is going to sink very fast. Writing can be a possible benchmark for these kinds of studies. And I'm kind of saying that as someone who values communication a lot. It'll probably be my life's work. But it could be possible that assessing how a student body approaches written and verbal forms of communication could help be beneficial to a school's assessment. Writing encompasses professional behavior, it encourages critical thinking, it values research, how you get your ideas, doing your own decision making before you present your stance. The only question is, I guess if you want to get the survey of a bunch of different departments in a college, say we start with York, how are they going to care about something seated in the humanities? In a chemist's coursework, are they ever going to learn how to write for professional situations, or is it only going to be academic ones? Is writing touched at all? Is it just glued to the periodic table? Solving those questions and evaluating curriculums is kind of what fascinates me. When you ask faculty at institutions, a lot of them will say for higher level courses that students should know how to effectively write, form their own opinions, but they might hit their heads against the wall finding that their class won't all necessarily be prepared for that level. When an engineering professor assigns a paper, do they ever take into account the audience of what the paper is going to be? Is it just supposed to be the professor and the paper is locked inside the college? If we're not going to assess the students in skills like these, then we might have to turn our attentions to the faculty, but that's not quite the end results we're looking for. With the Generation X standards here, I find that the collection of different classes to make us versed in other areas is all really a gamble, hoping that the branching out we do makes us aware of other fields, open to new ideas. In the end, it's not going to be measured how useful that learning was, though, in the end, and it's only a possibility that the learning will be applied. Colleges are very end-product-oriented establishments, and yet, like I've learned with this PBS article, as a country we're a long ways off to determining whether our current system gets the results we want. Tough as it is to admit, once the next generation comes along and the professionals, and perhaps find the recent graduates aren't living up to expectations, by then it's already too late. So that was basically a long and spirited discussion on academics, I think, that took about maybe 10 minutes or so. Let's switch gears to some music. Final song of the hour. So Kylie Lotes is a young solo artist from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and goes by the band name Pedal. One of her powerful songs, 15, is up next here on 88.1 FM WVYC, and I'll be back in 3 minutes to close out the hour. 15 by Pedal here at 88.1 FM WVYC, the voice of your college. That will wrap it up for me in the studio for this week. Hope you can catch the show again next week from 3 to 4 p.m. on Fridays. Until next time, my name is Keelan Tollinger, and thanks for joining me this afternoon on WVYC. We will leave things off with Holy Esque and their song Hex. And hope to catch you next time. Have a good one.